Good afternoon. I'm Donna Richmond, Chief of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Montgomery County. Welcome to Montgomery County's DEI Speaker Series. In celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month, we are excited about today's topic and national theme for this year's Hispanic Heritage Month, Prosperity, Power, and Progress. We are even more excited about our speaker, Mr. Norman Bristol Colón, PA's Chief Diversity Officer, and we are extremely grateful that he has agreed to be with us today. Before welcoming our speaker, I just have a few reminders. Closed captioning is enabled. Anyone needing closed captioning can access it. There will be time for a Q&A at the end of today's session. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we will address as many questions as possible. So, without further delay, I would like to welcome Mr. Milton Velez, Esquire, Assistant Solicitor for Montgomery County. Milton will introduce our speaker for the hour. So again, thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Milton.
Señoras y señoras, damas y caballeros, es un placer hoy poder tener esta oportunidad. Hola, bienvenido y feliz mes del hispano. Oh, I'm sorry. I saw all these faces on the screen, so I thought I was in church. Never mind. We'll go back to English. It's my privilege today to introduce our guest speaker, el señor Norman Bristol Colón. Mr. Colón presently serves as the Chief Diversity Officer for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, a position for which he is eminently qualified. He has checked off all the boxes. He's a proud Latino of Puerto Rican descent. Check. He speaks fluent Spanish. Check. He's a graduate of Penn State University. Double check. And he's an above average salsa dancer, so he gets a check and a half for that one. He continually worked to address and incorporate issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout state government. Check. He is a dedicated public servant. Check. And he's also a proud resident of Lancaster County. Well, we won't hold that one against him. Everyone has a mistake in their life. But more importantly, Norman is a dedicated public servant who spent his entire adult and professional career serving the residents of Pennsylvania. In that capacity, he has a very, very distinguished resume. He has been the Director of Special Projects for the Pennsylvania Department of State. He's been the Executive Director of the Governor's Census 2020 Complete Count Commission. He's been assistant to the Pennsylvania State Secretary of State. He's been special assistant to the Deputy Secretary of Community Affairs and Economic Development as well. And he was executive director of GACLA, which is the Governor's Advisory Commission on Latino Affairs. And that is where Norman and I worked together many, many moons ago. So without any further hesitation, I am very happy to introduce el señor Norman Bristol Colón.
Muchas gracias. Good afternoon, everyone. And before I make some of my official remarks, I would like to first thank Donna for the invitation to join you today as we celebrate the countless contributions that Latinos have made and continue making to our nation, to our state, and indeed to the world. So thank you, Donna, Montgomery County, for inviting me. And of course, thank you, Milton, mi hermano Latino, a Latino brother, for that introduction. And I am so happy that you are joining us. Milton has been a key partner in efforts statewide to advance the social, political, economic, and educational status of Latinos in Pennsylvania. Today's conversation is going to be about many topics that I hope I can get your attention for the next, few minutes or maybe an hour. All depends on how, fast I can cover all the bases, and especially now that you are in the Philadelphia area. I think covering all the bases when the Philly just, are in the postseason makes a lot of sense for me to talk about that. In addition to that, because Latinos, they love baseball. And baseball is in the DNA of the Latino community of the nation, but also of Pennsylvania, having one of the greatest legends of baseball from right here in Pennsylvania, our dear legend Roberto Clemente. And before I go into the what is the status of the Latino community of Pennsylvania, let me just share with you some of the things that we are doing at the state level on the Commonwealth Office of Diversity, Equity, Belonging, and Inclusion. First, I would like to take a moment to read to you what the governor said profoundly during his inauguration address. And the governor said, and I quote, "No matter what you look like, where you come from, who you love, or who you pray to, you have a place here in Pennsylvania. And I am building an administration that represents the entire Commonwealth and brings Pennsylvanians together." End of quote. That statement is clear and profound, and that's why before you I can stand today as the Commonwealth Chief Diversity Officer. It is my job, when Pennsylvania is more diverse now than ever before, to bring people together so we can have a common destiny, a common purpose, and a common agenda. And the work that we do in diversity, equity, and inclusion is also very clear. This is an economic imperative. It is in the best interest of Pennsylvania that we do this work, because we don't not only want to compete with New Jersey and Delaware and Maryland and New York and Ohio. We want to compete with the large economies of the world, like India and China and Germany and Italy. And the only way that we are going to succeed is by having a strong, robust DEBI or diversity, equity, belonging, and inclusion agenda. It is also a human relations imperative. You know, the founding fathers, when they established what is now the United States of America, it was with the whole purpose for us to be a beacon of hope, a beacon of opportunity, and a beacon of freedom. And that should always be the North Star for the work that we do in diversity. It's about creating the human relations scenarios where all of us, we feel that we belong. Whether you arrive in the United States or your family arrived in the United States more than 250 years ago, or you just have an immigrant that just moved to Montgomery County yesterday. It is a human relations imperative because we want that individual to also feel welcome in your neighborhoods, in your places of worship, and of course, in the workplace. It is also a competitiveness imperative. We are not the only ones that are addressing diversity. The 50 states of the union are doing it as well. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? I want Pennsylvania to lead in that front because I think that if we have been leading in many fronts before, we are ready to lead on diversity and equity right here in Pennsylvania. It is a nonpartisan imperative. Both sides of the aisle, they both have great benefits of establishing and embracing a strong diversity, equity, belonging, and inclusion agenda. And why it should be a nonpartisan issue? Because you all know that we live in the strongest democracy on earth. We are going to have Republicans and Democrats elected, every 4 years or every 2 years, and we are going to have changing governments. So it is a nonpartisan imperative that we continue to sustain our democracy and we continue to sustain our union, a union that is now more diverse than ever before. For us in the Commonwealth and the DEBI-PA agenda that we are consolidating and putting together is also the development of our human capital to sustain Pennsylvania's future. And that future, I would like to address to you later on in my presentation, because that future is more and more diverse than ever before. Now, in state government, we have been partnering with key individuals and key organizations, with the public and private sectors. So the work that we do here, not only is the work on behalf of 80,000 state employees, but also the work that will impact 30 million fellow Pennsylvanians. Because diversity is our strength. Diversity is our strength. Diversity is our strength. So ladies and gentlemen, with that said, let me move into some of the diversity components and the diversity, remarks that I would like to make to you today. When you look at the nation, and we have almost 48 million African Americans, 1.5 million of them living in Pennsylvania, with a median age for African American of 33. Half of the nation's Black population is young, and is getting younger and younger. And the African American population, they have a purchasing power of more than $1.6 trillion. When you look at Latinos, the Latino community of the nation, 65 million Latinos in the United States. That is including the more than 3 million US citizens living in the island Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. In Pennsylvania, we have 1.1 million Latinos, with a purchasing power exceeding today of all Latinos in the United States, more than $3 trillion. And I will get to that at the end of my remarks. Then we have the 600,000 Asian and Pacific Americans in Pennsylvania, 600,000 in PA, but more than 24 million in the United States, with a purchasing power of more than $1.3 trillion. When you combine these populations, we are talking about more than 100 million citizens and residents of the United States. And that is profound, and that is important that we recognize that in a nation of more than 350 million individuals, more than 100 million are ethnic minorities. And that will continue to be the growth in population in our states, in our surrounding neighboring state, but also all across the nation. When you combine the purchasing power of those communities, and that's why diversity is so important for us, and competition is so important for us, we have a purchasing power that is larger than all economies of the world, with the exception of the United States and China. So if we will be a nation standing alone, the African American, Latino, Asian and Pacific Islander, and yes, the LGBTQ community, that would be the world's third largest economy, just the world's third largest economy. So having this conversation today, even when we are celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, it is important. It is important for Montgomery County. It's also important for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And indeed, it is so important for the nation and the world. As I was mentioning before, when we look at Pennsylvania's population, I would like to talk to you more on the Pennsylvania level. Pennsylvania is more diverse than ever before. With a total population of 13 million individuals, our workforce readiness must embrace diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. But when you look, 1.1 million Latinos in Pennsylvania for the very first time, we are reaching 1 million. Latinos represented more than 50% of Pennsylvania's population growth in Census 2020, in Census 2010, and in Census 2000, which means that for the last 30 years, the vast amount of the population growth in Pennsylvania have been accounted to the Latino community of the states. I was the director of the Census 2020 Commission, and we were scheduled to lose 2 congressional seats based on population growth. As you all know, the amount of individuals serving in the US Congress is 535, including the members of the House and the Senate. So in the House, only 435 members. That population growth across the state and across the nation will really define and divide the 435 congressional districts. While Pennsylvania was scheduled to lose 2 of them, because we are not growing as fast as many other states like North Carolina, Texas, and Florida. However, because we were able to really engage the Latino community of Pennsylvania and all minority communities of Pennsylvania during census, we were able to save 1 congressional seat. So to my Latino friends that are listening today, please know that you have contributed. You have to contribute to sustain Pennsylvania's place in the national political map. You have been contributing not only in saving that congressional seat, but also in billions and billions and billions of dollars that will come back to Pennsylvania for the next 10 years. Because remember that depending on the size of the population is the funding that we will receive from the federal government. And that is only defined by census every 10 years. So, and I would like also to talk to you about the state of the Latino community. And I would like to go, more into the, the dark side, and then I will go to the bright side of things. Between 2000 and 2020, the total population change in Pennsylvania was 4%. For Latino Pennsylvanian was 173%. Do you hear me loud and clear? I will repeat that line again. Between 2000 and 2020, the total population change in Pennsylvania was only 4%. For Latino Pennsylvanians was 173%. Our state and nation are more diverse today than ever before, and much of that diversity has been driven by the growth of the Latino population. And as I was mentioning before, in Pennsylvania, Latinos have represented more than 50% of the state population growth in the last 3 decades, comprising 1.1 million Latinos today. Nationally, Latinos are the largest minority ethnic group with more than 65 million Latinos in the US mainland, and as I was mentioning before, on the island of Puerto Rico, accounting today to 19% of the nation's population. Even when Latinos are fueling the state's and nation's growth, community progress on social justice issues has been a challenge that remains unsolved and without much attention. Let's talk about one of the issues on the dark side, and that is discrimination. We all witness brown kids in cages, and most recently, individuals put on buses under alleged lies and with a resounding un-American message of "you are not welcome here." And they have been sending those individuals to Pennsylvania, to Philadelphia, and to many other eastern states of the Union. Situation which on both occasions can truly be defined as human trafficking. According to the United Nations, human trafficking is the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of people through force, fraud, or deception, with the aim of exploiting them for profit. On both occasions, the profit has been political and substantially monetary as fundraising spectacles. To accept this happening on American soil is a mutilation to the soul of our country. When it comes to discrimination, Latinos have been discriminated harshly in the past decade. Voter suppression is another one of the big issues impacting negatively the Latino community of Pennsylvania and the nation. As we continue to grow, so should our political influence. Latino voter disenfranchisement is at a historic high. Duly registered US citizen Latinos have been discouraged to vote or their voter registration revoked on grounds nothing more than voter suppression, discrimination, and intimidation. We must stop the bleeding of our democracy by guaranteeing equal access to the ballot box and especially to this new emerging Latino community. Then we can talk about poverty and access to care. Eradicating Latino poverty in Pennsylvania is a social justice issue that we all should rally behind. In many urban regions, Latinos are concentrated in highly poverty disadvantaged areas with inadequate resources for public transportation, healthcare, clinics, and lack of quality education programs. Pennsylvania's Latino community continues to experience health disparities, lowest insurance enrollment rates, and difficulty to access to care. 19% of Hispanic Latinos are uninsured in our state. An annual median income for Hispanic Latinos 16 and older is $23,000, the lowest income earning in the state. So if we are in the process of making equity and inclusion paramount to every single aspect of Pennsylvania society, we need to take a closer look of the way Latinos have been treated and the salaries that they have been earning. Housing security is another big issue in the Latino community. Gentrification is becoming the most highly producer of poverty and displacement of Latino families in urban centers of our states, in places like Allentown, Lancaster, and Philadelphia, where the Latino community remained during the urban economic and housing crisis of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Now, economic development is pushing families out. Many working class and low-income families face severe problems in obtaining safe, sanitary, and decent housing, not only for lack of availability, but also due to systemic, historic housing discrimination practices. 39% home ownership rate for Latinos, Hispanic in Pennsylvania. To change that course, boosting home ownership is an imperative for the Latino community of the states. Now, when we are talking about workforce development and pay equity, workforce development, education, and training opportunities in the states, focusing strategically and intentionally to enhance the Latino community's prospects to a life out of poverty and an entrance to the middle class is a challenge we must address at city, county, and state levels. By 2024, 25% of the nation's workforce will be Latino. In fact, Latinos will represent more than 75% of labor force growth in the next 8 years. However, Latino wages are much more lower than any other racial and ethnic group. And something that breaks my heart and should break your heart as well is that households led by Latina single mothers are the poorest of the poor. For every dollar a white man makes, a Latina woman makes 55 cents or less. Income gaps and pay inequalities continue to hold progress and opportunity, and of course, continue disenfranchising and perpetuating poverty in Latino communities all across the states and the nation. And finally, one of the dark sides of the issues that I would like to share with you today is also racism. Hate incidents targeting Latinos are on the rise nationally. Pennsylvania has not been an exception. The constant complaints of employment discrimination and abuse, lack of promotion, and unjustifiable firings are becoming distressful scenarios in many Latino households. One factor contributing to the marginalization of the Latino community relates to the images held about its members by dominant society. In summary, we are at a crossroad. Latinos are at the edge of reaching more than 1.2 million residents in Pennsylvania, yet our stories are not written, our experiences are not included, our voices are ignored. We wish to create a bridge for unprecedented advances in the inclusion and progress of Latinos in all aspects of Pennsylvania life, culture, traditions, and future. As the youngest community, and I will get into that later, as the youngest community in the Commonwealth, the Latino community is intertwined with the future progress of Pennsylvania. We call for the building of an inclusive social justice agenda which embraces, demands, realities, and opportunities of the growing Latino community. Ladies and gentlemen, by 2060, the Latino population is projected to increase more than 111 million in the United States, or 28% of the US population. So dismantling structural racism is at the heart of that fight for civil rights and racial equity. For Brown people, racism continues to provide a separate and unequal American journey, even when for centuries we have been American Latinos. The state of the Latino community in the nation is also a great mirror to what is going to continue to happen in Pennsylvania. So I would like to share with you some of those numbers. And when you look at the 222 corridor in Pennsylvania, for example, that is the 222 corridor is Bethlehem, Easton, Bethlehem, Allentown, Lancaster, York, Reading, Lebanon, and Harrisburg. That is where a lot of the population is happening in Pennsylvania, with, of course, the counties of Philadelphia and the surrounding counties of Montgomery, Delaware, and Bucks County. So when you look at Philadelphia's population growth, for example, in the past 10 years, the only reflection of that growth in population in the city of Philadelphia between 2010 and 2020 was accounted to 3 groups: immigrants, Asian and Pacific Islanders, and Latinos. That is the vast majority of the population growth in the city of Philadelphia. Now, when you look at the total population change in the Commonwealth, and this is very interesting. In 2010, we have about 12,700,000 Pennsylvanians. In 2020, it was 13 million Pennsylvanians. That is a difference of more than 300,000 individuals. Guess what? Between 2010 and 2020, that is exactly the same number of population growth and change in the Latino community of Pennsylvania. So you see how connected we are to the growth of population in our state. Now, there are some aspects that I would like to share with you about the Latino community of the nation. When it comes to education, about 42% of US Hispanics ages 25 and older had at least some college, and they have been experiencing a boom. So now I want to go to the bright side. Latinos have been growing in colleges and universities in the past 10 years, more than any population and ethnic group in the nation. The number of Latinos enrolled in college increased from 2010 to 2019 from 2.9 million to about 3.6 million. The decline in the Hispanic dropout rate is particularly noteworthy, given the large increase in Hispanic enrollments in US public and private schools. Between 1999 and 2016, the number of Hispanics enrolled in public and private nursery schools, K-12 school and colleges increased 80%. Between 1999 and 2016, increased 80% from 9.9 million to about 17.9 million today in the nation. So ladies and gentlemen, when you look at the median age of the United States, it's about 41 years old. For Latinos at the national level, it's about 27. When you look at the median age of Pennsylvanians, it's about the mirror of the nation. It's about 41, 42. For Latinos, it's 27. Now, I want to take this even closer. When you go to places like Reading, Pennsylvania, where 84% of the student population are Latinos, which means that 84% of Reading future as of today is Latino. The median age becomes much younger, from 27 to about 17 in the city of Reading. That is the median age, and it's due to that young Latino population. When you go to the city of Lancaster, 60% of the student population. Allentown, more than 60% of the student population. Lebanon, a very rural county, more than 50% of the student population in Lebanon, Latino. When you go to your neighboring city of Philadelphia, more than 300,000 Latinos are living in the city of Philadelphia. So the median age, it is important because that will help us in defining the future, but also policy and programs that will impact the Latino community of the nation and, of course, of Pennsylvania today. Now, there was a recent report about the US Latino GDP. And the US Latino GDP today stands at $3.2 trillion. $3.2 trillion. That will rank ahead of the United Kingdom and India. And you all know that India just became the most populated nation on earth. So when you have the Latino community collectively, from California to New York, from Pennsylvania to Florida, it is a purchasing power of $3.2 trillion that once again will rank ahead of the United Kingdom and India. The group contributed to a fifth of the real GDP growth between 2011 and 2021. Report shows Latino economy rising faster than the rest of the US population. The contributions of Latinos to the US economy rose once again to a historic $3.2 trillion in 2021, which, listen to me clear, which will rank the Latino population and the Latino community of the nation fifth in the world if the group were an independent country. Fifth, just behind Germany and ahead once again of the United Kingdom and India. The US Latino economy continues to grow, from $2.8 trillion last year to a remarkable $3.2 trillion this year. If Latinos, in the industry that Latinos have been working steady is in accommodation, food services, construction, administrative support, waste management, and transportation. Over the last decade, the US Latino economy has grown 2.5 times faster than the non-Latino equivalent, surpassing the gross domestic product of, once again, United Kingdom, India, France, and Italy, according to a report released by LDC, a nonprofit organization. Now, let me make some concluding remarks, because I would like to get into some of the questions. The Latino community of Pennsylvania is here, ladies and gentlemen. We are here to stay. And the Latino community of the nation has been in the United States even before this land was called the United States of America. I am sure that you have heard the phrase, "We didn't cross the border crossed us." And that is exactly what happened with the Latino community of the nation. When you look at the history of states like Texas, New Mexico, California, Arizona, they were part of Mexico. And that's why when you visit these places, you have San Antonio, San Diego, and Santa Clara, and a lot of Spanish names, because Latinos were living there even before the United States became what it is today. So that tells me, according to history, that the first inhabitants of what is now the United States of America were Native American Indians. But the second inhabitants of what is now this soil, this country, what we call America, have been Latinos. Latinos have been members of the United States cultural tapestry even before the founding of this nation. When you look at every single war, and Latinos have been involved, from the Civil War to the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, patriotism is part of who we are. That's why American Latinos contribute so heavily on veterans, but also on the service to our country and to our nation. When you look at the unprecedented growth in the Latino community of the nation, Pennsylvania is not an exception. And I will leave with this. We are here to worship together with you. We are here to go to school with you. We are here to work with you. We are here to be equal partners and to contribute to the promising future of this Commonwealth and of this nation. And today, I thank you for joining us in this crusade to ensure that there is a place for the Latino community of Pennsylvania and the nation in the history of our country, but also in the future of our nation and our state. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate everything that you shared with us today. We do have a few questions, and I would just like to remind our guests that you are welcome to put any additional questions in the chat. The first question that we got was a statement and a question. So it's purchasing power is always brought up when discussing diversity and inclusion. Hasn't the Hispanic community contributed more than just purchasing power?
Absolutely. You know, when you look at, for example, let me give you an example of COVID. Excuse me. When COVID impacted the United States and of course Pennsylvania as well, the frontline workers were Latinos. When you went to the supermarkets, when you went to the pharmacies, when you know, whatever was running the nation when COVID was so, you know, devastating, you will go to places and you saw brown people working. So the contributions are endless in that sector. And that's why you see that at the beginning of COVID, Latinos suffer more death than any other ethnic group in the United States, because once again, they were the front workers. They were the ones that in order to get from point A to point B, they were using public transportation. So they were gathering in big masses. So that is a big contribution of the Latino community beyond the economy. But in addition to that, you know, we have been, as I was mentioning before, from the Gettysburg, you know, the war in Gettysburg all the way, Latinos have been contributing on the patriotism in the armed forces and keeping freedom and democracy alive in the United States. And in addition to that, you know, when you look such a young population that is growing all across the state and the nation, and 25% of the nation's future is going to be, you know, Latino. The only way that that future is prosperous is because we have a long legacy of work ethics that we have been working in every single industry. And I will end with this. When you look at the migrant farm work or farmers and farm workers in the nation today, more than 80% of the farm workers in the United States are Latino. So we have to be grateful to that workforce, because through their work, we are the most fed nation in the world.
Thank you. You had mentioned earlier that the college-going rate of the Latino community is increasing and the completion rate is increasing. One of our questions in the chat is, what is the state doing to improve educational outcomes for Latino students?
Well, if you have been following specifically what this governor has been doing with the new investment in education that surpassed over $500 million, and those $500 million in new investments are going to underserved, underprivileged school districts. You know, Donna, you and I know that those are the districts that Black and brown kids are attending. So with that new investment, we hope, and we know, we recognize that money will not change the course. You know, we also need to change attitudes, and we also need to make sure that we are investing in books and in equipment, the equipment of the future in the classroom. But I think that through that investment, we are going to see tremendous growth in educational excellence for Latino students all across the state.
Thank you. Speaking of, making investments and seeing positive changes, the next question is, how do you eliminate the false negative stereotypes that exist with respect to the Latino community?
Well, one thing is, I think that we all play a major role, not only us in state government, but also local, county government. They play a major role as well. First, I think that when we are inclusive and we have an agenda of equity, and there is Latino representation in county government, in state government, that there is a Latino representation in local government, in school districts, we can change some of the mentality that individuals have, and they see us as competent individuals. And I am very proud to say that at least at the state level. We have the most diverse administration in history. And we just started this administration in January. And we are just getting started to make it the most diverse administration in the history, because it is important that when people look at government, that we are a government that represents every single diverse individual in Pennsylvania. So that's one thing. The second thing is, I think that we need to create in the media, for example, because a lot of the damage that is done in the Latino community of Pennsylvania comes from the news media. They tend to concentrate only on the 5 p.m. Reports of something negative that happened, but they completely ignore the 100 good things that have been happening in the Latino community of the state. A kid that graduated from a public poor school and is getting more than $1 million in scholarship and is a Latino. So the media also have to be a key partner in changing the image of the Latino community and to stop perpetuating that Latinos are only good to be janitors and to be farm workers. Nothing against that, because every job is important, but the TV programs need to change and make us also the top CEOs and executives, not only on the entry-level jobs.
Thank you. The next question. Home ownership is related to the ability to get a loan. Many Latinos lack the proper documents to get a loan, and therefore buying a home becomes an impossible goal. Are there any plans for a comprehensive project to support Latinos in their dream of home ownership?
And that is an excellent question. And it is an excellent question just because of the following fact. So if you have any realtors in the audience, this is very interesting. Homeowners in the next about 20 years, for the next 20 years, Latinos will represent 80% of the new homeowners in the nation. So, or the possible homeowners in the nation. We have a very comprehensive agenda in the Commonwealth to ensure that we are providing not only the resources to the community-based organizations through the banks, but also to the individuals on how they can access the wealth when it comes to home ownership all across the state, in a way that is not only about providing that information through the banks and the local organization, but also in a language that individual will understand much better.
Thank you. Our next question is the Spanish community encouraged, or the Hispanic Latino community encouraged, to become American citizens?
Absolutely, and that is another excellent question. The great majority of Latinos in the nation are U.S. citizens. More than 80% of Latinos in the United States are U.S. citizens. In Pennsylvania, that number is even higher. It's more than 90% of Latinos in Pennsylvania that are U.S. citizens. Why? Because the great majority of Latinos in Pennsylvania are Puerto Ricans, and Puerto Ricans by birth, they are U.S. citizens. We have been U.S. citizens since 1917. So when you look at the composition of Pennsylvania's Latino community, Puerto Rican being the majority, and by birth being U.S. citizen, Latinos are the great majority of us in Pennsylvania are U.S. citizens today.
Thank you. I will say that there are a lot of comments in the chat that are thanking you for your presentation and the fact that there has been a lot learned today from your presentation. There is a two-part question. How could government leaders and administrators help with discriminatory resistance to new Latino residents from more established communities? That's the first part.
Well, I think that we have the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act that we have to enforce, and one of them is on fair housing. And by enforcing that act, and not only from the state level, but also county and local governments reaching out to us to ensure that there is a process on fair housing, we will be able to protect the integrity not only of a housing fairness, but also the dignity of the individual that is looking for opportunities in Pennsylvania. So we have the mechanism in place. We have the tools to protect people. Individuals need to reach out to us and file complaints. You know, one of the issues that we see mainly in the Latino community of Pennsylvania is, number one, when it comes to issues of discrimination, they remain silent and they don't file a complaint. Same with law enforcement abuse. You go and the Latino community do not file complaints. I think education and awareness in that space is important. So the Latino community knows that we are a state of law and we are a state of order, and that applies to everyone. And in order for us to protect them, they need to follow the process. And their process is in place to ensure that not only from the state level, but also we have so many laws at the national level, from the federal government to protect individuals in Pennsylvania from discrimination, harassment, racism. But the individuals that have been the victim must come out and provide the information to us.
Thank you. And the second part of that question is, how can more established Latino community members help this situation?
You know, I think the time has come for us to be more proactive as a community. Many times, I believe that my community is very humble. You know, we want to work 8 to 5, and after 5, we just want to go home and be with our families and community and do a lot of volunteer work. Well, we have to make ourselves a little bit more uncomfortable and in addressing these issues. Not only because I am comfortable today means that I don't have to care about the next that will be coming, and especially because we know that Pennsylvania's growth is going to be intertwined and straightly connected to the Latino community. So if we can advance the causes to prevent any issues of discrimination, racism, biases in the Latino community today, that will help us in having a more prosperous, established, and sustainable community in the future.
Thank you. Another question just popped up, and this is probably one of our last questions. The comment is, you said there was discrimination towards Latinos in healthcare. Are there programs in place to assist Latinos with this issue? And what do you recommend for someone who works for a nonprofit that helps connect Latinos with disabilities with healthcare and community services?
Well, you know, when it comes to healthcare and the Latino community, and not only in the Latino community, but healthcare and the African American community, Black and Brown communities are in a very disadvantage. First, I think that we need to have a more cohesive effort to ensure that there is a pipeline for schools, you know, where we can have a STEM careers kind of pipeline integrated early on in Latino communities all across the state early on for kids in elementary school, so we can have the doctors of the future, you know, addressing and taking care of the patients of the future. And the patients of the future are going to look like the doctors of the future. So that is important, that we also take responsibility on ensuring that education and educational opportunities are available today, so we can create that pipeline. It's like in education. We are working on a brown pipeline in education. How can we, you know, ensure that the teachers of the future also look like the students of the future? And we as a community have to take a sense of responsibility on that. But on the other side as well, you know, we have to hold institutions accountable. We have to hold healthcare and hospitals accountable. And one thing that we are doing, at least through the efforts that we have statewide, we are providing class standards and cultural, you know, training to institutions of not only at the clinic level, local level, but also to healthcare institutions all across the state to ensure that they know that exactly what I was mentioning before, that Pennsylvania is changing. Pennsylvania is more diverse. This is what you should expect from different regions. Where is that population growth? So they are not caught by surprise, or that the answer from them to us is we didn't know anything. I would rather give you all the information so there are no excuses, and we can get to the root of the problem, because we have provided you with everything, knowing that that population is changing, not only, let's say in Montgomery County, but it's also changing in Delaware County and in all the surrounding counties, Chester, for example. So that's something that we are working closely in providing the training to enhance opportunities, but also to hold people accountable.
Thank you. I want to thank you for your time today, because it was so important to hear your message. And some of the things that resonated with me was the fact that you stated that diversity is our strength. And I think sometimes, we don't recognize that as a really strong statement in terms of its strength. So we appreciate that. You mentioned that inclusive social justice is the agenda of the administration. So thank you for bringing that to our attention as well. And just that sense of belonging that you shared with us, and how important it is for all people in the United States, in Montgomery County and Pennsylvania, to feel a sense of belonging. So we appreciate that message as well. We have just a few minutes left. Is there anything as a result of what you shared with us, or the questions that were asked today, that you would want to share with us in terms of final comments?
I will just, like to take a personal privilege, and in just closing today's event. Ladies and gentlemen, even when I share with you some very dark messages about the negative things happening to the Latino community, I also want you to know that we are hopeful, that it is a community that is full of strength and resiliency. And it is important to also recognize that we have amazing good people in Pennsylvania, all across Pennsylvania. And I think that I am an example of that. When I moved to Pennsylvania from Puerto Rico, when I was 16 years old, my last year of high school, I brought to Pennsylvania absolutely nothing, not even a dime in my pockets. But my pockets were full of hopes, dreams, and aspirations. And I think that Pennsylvania have given me more than I expected. I have been truly blessed with the opportunities that the state has given me, from working early on with the same program that helped me, with the migrant education program that helped me as a migrant and seasonal farm worker kid, that elevated my thinking that it was possible, that hope is possible, that I had the opportunity to really work, like Milton said, from almost every single governor since I moved to Pennsylvania. That today, the American dream is still alive, because I am an example of that. I stand before you as the first Commonwealth Chief Diversity Officer, and it only happens because there's good people in Pennsylvania that believe that a kid from a poor barrio in Guayama, Puerto Rico, also deserves a chance, and that we could level the playing field by providing the adequate education. And I work every day, in every occasion, in every opportunity, to ensure that we continue providing the same opportunities that I had to future generations, because that is the only way that we indeed are going to build a better Pennsylvania. Because, I feel it in my heart, best days are still ahead of us. And I share with you the future, and I share with you those numbers. And I know that, in that community that is growing in Pennsylvania, indeed, best days are still ahead of us. And remember that when we advance the Latino agenda, we advance the Pennsylvania agenda. Because when Latinos succeed, we all succeed in Pennsylvania.
Very well said. So thank you so very much for your time. Thank you for the information that you shared. I believe that we have all learned a lot of information. You have impacted us professionally and personally, and we're blessed for having heard you speak today. So thank you so much for your time and giving of yourself. And as one of our guests said in the chat, we hope that you will join us again and give us an update. This was
Absolutely.
a pleasure. Thank you to everybody who joined us this afternoon. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.